Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Front Mission 5, Scars of the War. So we're going to do this base section. As you can see, the move out option is already available, so, that just tells us this whole thing is optional. You can just head straight on over to Alaska if you like, but I wouldn't recommend it because there is a whole lot of great stuff you can get in this final Fort Monus section. So yeah, this is our last time at Fort Monus in the entire game. And it is the last time that Fort Monus shows up in the Front Mission series. It doesn't show up in Front Mission 3 at all. So we'll say a fond farewell to the place where we first did our training and met a whole lot of people, had a whole lot of experiences. Right, so we're going to get started here by, I guess, heading over to the gym because, as I've been saying, we want to recruit this guy, Duke Takahashi. But before we do that, as you can see, he is the S-type assault that we've been waiting for. Before that, we do that, let's just listen to this dialogue. So I really don't like this decision to include Duke among these pilots who are who basically washed out of the Bargus training. As you know, we've heard before, you only get 2 chances to get into special forces, including Bargus, it seems. Although, originally we saw that in relation to the Strike Wyverns, but these guys all failed, and now their only chance of getting into Bargus is getting scouted by Fung, by Walter, and when we saw the earlier part of the game during the second Huffman conflict, Duke Takahashi was portrayed as this badass guy that basically does all the hardest missions. And now he's just some guy who washed out of training, right? He's way too old to be going into this kind of training. This is ridiculous. He's supposed to be a veteran. So I don't like this at all. I think it, just plays into the weakness of the character system, the whole NPC system in this game with the very large cast of NPCs without much development. They kind of get used in strange ways occasionally, and this is one of them. But anyway, we can talk to Duke. So yeah, that's what he's got to say. And yeah, he's heavily relied upon even when away from duty, but he couldn't make it through training. But he can join our unit. So that dialogue makes sense to me. It's just this thing doesn't make sense. If we talk to the other characters, though, their dialogue makes a lot more sense, given the context that we had. So, you know, we got, obviously you want to pick up that RP, but like this guy is trying to bribe us into recruiting him. This guy is like showing how badass he is, saying like, this bike just isn't enough to contain my manly power. Um, and this guy's like, yeah, I gotta work harder. But anyway, like they're all trying to show off so that Walter might recruit them. Um, and this guy also said like, oh yeah, like you know, I was just so badass in that last operation. You should have seen me. They're all trying to talk big so that they get recruited, but of course only Duke gets the recruitment. Okay, so we got Duke. Something we've been waiting for a long time, so I'm happy about that, even if the story beats are a little bit weak there. So then we'll continue to the bunks. So, something strange is going on in the bunks. These soldiers all say that the trunk isn't theirs, but it belongs to some guy. Who could it be? Who could it possibly be that Captain Gifford is looking for? Well, I think you all know who it is. There's only one practical joker in this game. Yep, so we're going to make sure we scout out all the S-type, all the S-type pilots that we can, and we can see that Carl Gibson, who is, you know, another high-ish ranked Bargus member, is subjecting these three poor pilots to like basically a fear factor eating contest, and that's his method of recruiting pilots. Right, so basically because these commanders in Bargast have the authority to recruit any pilot in the entire military, they can just use their power in fairly arbitrary ways to try to have fun. And before you go thinking, this is ridiculous, this would never fly in the military, if you go and read some stuff about SEAL Team 6, yeah, I mean, they have quite a reputation for being pretty out there, pretty wild. Not just in, like, you know, some of the atrocities that they may or may not have committed, but like just in their general crazy party behavior, because they recruit, like, they don't recruit through the normal military hierarchy. They'll just recruit openly. You know, basically, if you can pass the training and you can pass the clearance checks, then you can get in. And so, unlike some other special forces units, they can be pretty wild. So it's not completely outside the realm of believability, I guess, that Bargus does ridiculous things like this, or members of Bargus do ridiculous things like this. Alright, so we've got some more Bargus members here, and we are going to recruit some of them just because they're S-type pilots, and this is our last chance. If you're wondering why I decided to wait to recruit these characters, it's just so that they come leveled up already. So we don't need to level them very much, just because they are scaled to your level. It's not a direct scaling, it's not one-to-one. But basically, when you pass certain thresholds, they will be assigned a certain level, and then you can just grab them, and you don't have to do a whole bunch of grinding in the battle simulator to get them up to snuff. So that's why I've been waiting on that. I'm not necessarily going to use them, but why not recruit them, right? Okay. And again, I have to apologize for all the translation problems in that Battle of Wits. Yeah, I don't know, I kind of screwed that one up, but I hope you kind of have an idea of what's going on in the story, and it's not too confusing. If you have any specific questions, you know, feel free to ask me, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And actually, I think this is a reference to Front Mission 3. Deep Sea, we kind of get a Deep Sea mission in Front Mission 3. One of the Philippines missions, I think it is, where you get to torpedo into an enemy ship. I might be getting that mixed up a little bit, but I'm pretty sure there is such a mission. And then the space, actually, some of you may or may not know this, but the Shunyo Vonzer, the Kirishima Industries Vonzer that Kazuki is testing at the beginning of Front Mission 3, was originally designed for space-based combat. So, that may be an illusion. This may be an allusion to Front Mission 3 because it is set further in the future. Not that much further in the future, but a little bit. And just, you know, what the kind of future tech that would be developed after the end of Front Mission 5 might be. And, you know, hey, I would be, you know, totally into a actual mainline Front Mission game, not Front Mission Evolved, having some kind of space level with, like, you know, some interesting game effects. That would be really interesting. Of course, it would have to be set after Front Mission 3 because you don't want to, like, screw up the continuity in terms of what Von Zeus can and can't do. So remember, FAI should actually be FIA if it was the proper English, but instead we get the English here. And yeah, it's basically the CIA, but the union-wide intelligence agency. And it's kind of quaint to hear like the echelon system referred to. Like these days, I mean, this was released before the Edward Snowden leak, so like echelon was kind of like that was the big crazy system that the NSA had that we thought was like the cutting edge of surveillance that they had, but like now we know about things like X key score and so on. So this seems pretty quaint these days. But yeah, it's conceivable that the NSA could intercept this kind of information that Grimnir was messaging back and forth. So again, there's all this kind of like off-screen skullduggery and like spy scheming that happens with Lynn and Hector that we don't really see much of, but is constantly alluded to. And it's just like how Hector figured out that Grimnir was going to Alaska in the first place. I do like that little note that, they're going to force themselves into like a really harsh training regime while they are waiting around for Grimnir to attack this facility. Just because it just speaks to their training and their commitment as members of Barghest to being, the top of the top in terms of soldiers. And it's also like something that you could conceivably see soldiers doing if they were forced into a situation like this where they're not moving around anymore like they're used to, they're not in the training facilities that they're used to, and they're not in a military setting like they're used to. So trying to maintain their training even when they're actually in a very new environment, I think is a little bit interesting. It's not like, wow, this is the most interesting plotline I've ever seen, but it is a nice little bit of lore, or just a nice plot point that I think seems pretty reasonable. Believable, I should say. And if you're wondering, like, what? Keep a can of booze in the cockpit? I think that might be, like, a reference to Alaska being cold and wanting to drink whiskey or something to stay warm. Otherwise, it's just kind of stupid. So what they're saying is that Hector knew that intelligence, so basically NSA, was watching Grimnir. So what he did is leaked the information about Midas, and then once that information was leaked, he went ahead and got the information that the NSA found from the NSA, even though he wasn't normally supposed to be able to do that. So he was manipulating Grimnir, and then he was manipulating the NSA to get what he planned. But you never really know because, as he says, you don't really know the depths of Hector. You don't really know much more than his exterior. Right, so we gotta watch out for Hector. And the whole thing where, like, I love that line that when Hector talks about Morgan Bernard, he seems like he's talking about a lover. I like that line, but I don't feel like it's really borne out in the cinematics in the game or in Hector's dialogue. I don't think it really comes across that strongly. But I do really like that line as like, wow, you know, Hector has this really weird relationship with Morgan Bernard, of like this kind of love-hate relationship. On the one hand, he wants revenge against him, but on the other hand, he's got something else going on that you're not really sure what it is. And then that like idea of him going through this life-changing experience of being experimented on by this basically this mad scientist and being one of the only survivors, but then like having been experimented on personally by that scientist and just having his entire life changed by that event. It just like makes his whole life revolve around Morgan Bernard to some extent, and I think that is pretty interesting. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't come across all that well in the cinematics. But we're gonna go back and talk to Hector a little bit more, so we'll see what he has to say. Okay, so we got Joshua Mackey. He's a gunner, S-type. We already have one. This is the point at which you would be able to get your first S-type gunner if you did let Laura get her ass kicked by Lynn. But that's not what we did, so we're just gonna grab an extra, stick him in the roster there, and then we're going to grab Justin Derrick, and we will replace Sarah with him because we already have a jammer S-type. And yeah, if you look at, sorry, we missed the pilot description on these two. It just says that this guy was trained in an assassin unit, and this guy is really good at, you know, doing his thing with launching missiles. I think it's kind of interesting the variety of pilots you see in Barghest, but yeah, again, the characterization is pretty shallow. Not my favorite thing about the game. So we've been to the bunks, the mess hall, the lounge, and the gym. That's all cleared out. Now we're going to head over to the ready room, I guess. See what everybody has to say. And that's just the usual thing where it's like this joke that Hector has to run across the base to come do the pilot organization for you. So he can be in two places at once, or almost at once. Secret weapon. Wonder what that could be. I think Hector might be alluding to the fact that he's a bit of a drunk. Yeah, not too sure about that, but I think that's what it's about. So he's probably got some whiskey stashed. Right. So one thing I did want to mention is that I'm because we are going to Alaska, I'm probably going to switch out the Barghest camo for some Arctic camo in this next upcoming section. Look at this. This is just so absurd. Yeah, I can tell. Yep, so none of these characters have any unique dialogue. Let's see what Daryl has to say. So yeah, there's a lot of alcoholism among our troops, but so it goes. Well, okay. I think we're actually going to be in a nice toasty worm research facility, but and that is what Grimnir is doing, not what we're doing, of course, because we're defending American soil. Who could that be? Someone we know, perhaps? Alright. There's a little bit of interesting dialogue here, and I think it's pretty hilarious. Right, so the enemy pilots such as, you know, like the Front Mission 1 pilots or whatever, or the Muddy Otters from Front Mission 2, they're not really the pilots from those games for obvious reasons if you know what happened to the Front Mission 1 pilots in Front Mission 2. Spoilers, you kill them. Yeah, that was some pretty wild stuff. Once again, Front Mission 2 with the crazy ambition, like, it's like the pilots from Front Mission 1, the Canyon Crow, they show up in Front Mission 2, and it's an optional side quest, but you actually kill them because they've really gone downhill and they are just kind of scummy mercenaries. So, like, you get to see Royd and stuff from a very different angle when you're playing in Front Mission 2, and who does that? Who goes and kills off their, you know, beloved protagonist and so on from the first game in the second game? Not just kills them off, but like basically has them turn into villains and has the player kill them. That is pretty gutsy. One of the many gutsy things they did in that game. And, you know, when I tell people about that, they're always like, oh, wow, like, what? Like, man, that sucks. But I appreciate them for being so daring. You know, in, like, Suikoden, you have the protagonists from previous games show up in subsequent games, but they're there to help you, right? Or in the Ogre Battle series, like, for instance, in Tactics Ogre or in Ogre Battle 64, you have characters from Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen show up, but they're on your side. They're the good guys, right? But yeah, in Front Mission 2, the Canyon Crow guys are not the good guys. So, yeah, wow. It just reminds me of that. But yeah, so anyway, there's supposed to be these, like, AI constructs, but, like, seeing how the AI actually fights in the battle simulator, it's like, they're so lifelike. How could they possibly create such an amazing simulation? It's like, well, I'll tell you. It's like it involves 3 behaviors and a random number generator. It's like, man, if this is what passes for advanced AI, I have some concerns about the future. Right, so this guy's coming with us to Alaska. Kind of cool. So we did this. I can check out the hangar. There's really nothing much to see here. Yeah, we'll do that, but not yet. is kind of an interesting point that if the Vonzers don't run on internal combustion, they would be more likely to freeze up if it's all electric. I don't know exactly what the particulars are of the Vonzer construction and how their power plant runs and that kind of thing, but kind of interesting. Just a little bit of realism, I guess, in a giant robot game. Alright, we can go over to the ops room and see Enos, who was getting chewed out the last time we were in Fort Monus. Oh yeah, so we got the Vizov set. And that is a great reason to go through that whole thing with Enos in the previous base section, because this is the best Vonzer you can get in normal mode by far. So we're going to have to decide who to give that to, but we will certainly be making use of it. And of course I'll be adding that to the Vonzer Roundup, which will be our next episode. Yeah, so this is kind of, I don't know, meh. Guy's really stuck up, and then he gets chewed out by the manly man, and now he's just like this sycophantic nobody who follows all the orders and worships the ground we live on. A little bit of like Stockholm Syndrome kind of thing going on. It's kind of disturbing, but yeah, whatever. It's part of this game. Okay, so we're gonna get back to a little bit of that Ed side plot. And this is definitely plot significant. Which one should I go with? I love how you only have two options, like go with one kind of ammo or the other kind of ammo. Oops. Now, I love this setup here. This is actually pretty good. I mean, even though it is this like weird cornball humor that you get in this game, I think this is actually pretty great. So remember, in the last base section, Clark was talking about how he's like, but he's not on Erica Asquith's level, right? Like, he's trying to think about some way to get with her, and then it's like, what? They're together, and now he's like shutting her down. Now he's gonna break up with her? What's going on? This is all really strange. Oh, what? Oh. So, yep, typical Ed. You can see why this game, if you look at the Japanese cover, it has some rating for suggestive themes. And I guess, in Final Fantasy VII, you get a little bit more of this, like, Cho-Aniki, like, macho homosexuality culture kind of thing stuck in there, like, with the golden saucer and that whole thing. But in, that it's pretty explicit in here. So, like, aside from the very mild sex scene that you see between Walter and Lynn, you also get this like pretty over the top skit that these two characters are presumably forced to do by Ed. So remember, Lynn was doing prototype testing with the technology that we got from Fortune Medical. So now that's starting to bear fruit, and it's produced a prototype, which we are just now picking up, or Ed is just now picking up, so that she can continue testing it. And that prototype, I believe, is related to the prototype that Hector used to bait out Morgan in South America. And at the same time, I think that it's like a distant relative of the direwolf that we fought in the previous mission. Because I think they are both derived from the same Fortune Medical technology. The S-type technology that they were doing at Fortune Medical. So this is actually like another translation problem that or is an error that I made. So Big Brother will do this now as like a literal translation, but really just means like, oh, here, I'll hand this over. And again, remember that I was translating this from a text dump without the context of you getting this item. So that's why there's this this error here. But yeah, it's just like, oh, here, I'll hand this over to you. And Big Brother's obviously Ed. So we got the Lynn White camo. Yeah, so that's her prototype's camo. And once again, this reference to Space in the Deep Sea, I think it has to be a reference to Front Mission 3. Or maybe horrifically Front Mission Evolved. Could have been some idea that was horribly twisted in the creation of Front Mission Evolved, but that existed prior to it. Terrorist casserole. Kind of a weird dialogue. It's like, well, okay. He doesn't really know much about Midas. He's just heard the myth. So we have picked up all the stuff we want to get, but we're going to go talk to Hector, and then we'll wrap up this video. So we know that Hector saw Morgan in Cambodia. So we know that he is lying to Walter. Right. So something up with Hector, we don't know quite what, but we will find out soon enough. And we will head off to Alaska, so I'm definitely going to be doing a whole lot of setting up stuff in the hangar. We got a new pilot. I got to get that pilot set up with the Gatling gun. I got to do all the parts upgrades. I got to set up the camo. I got to deal with the Vice-Off and how we're going to use it. So there's a whole lot of things I got to do for that. But following that, once I have that all done, then I will do the next Vonza Roundup. And yeah, following that, we will move on to Alaska. I'm not sure if there is a mission or if we get another base section straight away. So we'll find out about that. I'm pretty sure we get some kind of base section before we have another mission. Where we get to wander around the radiation facility, radiation lab, and meet an old friend. But anyway, we're going to do a new Vonza Roundup for the next video. There will be the Vice-Off, there will be the Giza, and probably something else I'm forgetting. But I'll be sure to check the Vonza list and make sure that I don't miss something this time, because I don't think it'll be the last one, but it'll probably be the second last. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. As for the whole thing about what I'm going to do next series, thank you for your comments. Please keep them coming. I haven't decided on anything yet, but I am still thinking about it. So until next time, I will see you then.